Thank you, Dr. Jim, for that brief introduction. Jim Boutillier is a legend in the Canadian Forces and the Royal Canadian Navy, and I'm honored to follow him to the podium and to listen to him earlier this morning during the first session of this conference. So thank you again, Dr. Jim. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to be here in Victoria. The City of Gardens is truly magnificent. It's a great Navy town and a fitting place to acknowledge the strong friendship and powerful alliance between Canada and the United States. Since I assumed command of the U.S. Pacific Fleet a year ago next week, I visited Ottawa for the Battle of the Atlantic ceremony, and then the 14th Wing in Greenwood. But my history with Canada and with British Columbia goes back a lot further than that. In 1995, when I commanded Patrol Squadron 46 in Whidbey Island, Washington, our sister squadron was our 407 Demon Squadron here in Comox. The 407 CO, Wing Commander Bruce Lewis, and I have been friends ever since. And many of you know Bruce. He's involved in your acquisition programs now. And this is not my first time in the Union Club either. My wife, Brittany, and I stayed here for our anniversary in 1995, so I can speak for both of us in saying that it's great to be back. So I would like to take a moment and acknowledge a few folks here tonight. The Indian High Commissioner to Canada, Admiral Verma, U.S. Consul General Platt, Vice Admiral Buck, with the Navy League of Canada, the official host of this conference, Lieutenant General Fig Leaf, with the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, which played a key role, I believe, in making this conference the important and respected forum that it is. Admiral Bill Truelove, the Royal Canadian Navy and Maritime Forces Pacific, who are the ones who did the heavy lifting to make this conference a success. And thank you for the important role that you and Maritime Forces Pacific play in maintaining regional peace and security. And I'd like you all to give it up for all the sponsors that actually funded this and allowed this to happen. So fellow flag officers, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, good evening and bonsoir. Let me begin by saying how honored I am to be here. Tonight I bring you the best wishes and the highest regards from Admiral Sam Locklear, the Commander of the United States Pacific Command and my boss. The Admiral sends his regrets that he could not be here. So just close your eyes and visualize. Pretend I'm taller, grayer, more distinguished looking, and a steely blue-eyed ship driver, and we'll be okay. So Admiral Locklear looked hard for the right speaker to represent him tonight. A speaker with the right amount of gravitas. A speaker with a true strategic persona. Well, when Hawk Carlisle and Vince Brooks and John Tulin were unavailable, he settled on me. Probably because he knows that I follow the first principle of public speaking, which is promise to be brief, no matter how long it takes. But really, I don't intend to talk long, because events like this remind me of a friend of mine who caught a fish and had it mounted on the wall in his den. The inscription on the plaque read, "If I hadn't opened my mouth, I wouldn't be here." So I think that's good reasons alone to keep my remarks brief. So tonight I've been asked to talk about the naval rebalance and Pacific sea power from my perspective. So let me tell you what's behind the evolution of America's rebalance to the Indo-Asia Pacific. Now I use the word evolution intentionally because America never left the Pacific. At the height of our wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, we were here in the Pacific, in force, helping to maintain the peace and stability that this region has enjoyed for decades. Even today, despite what's going on in the Middle East, Africa, and Europe, we're here in force and growing. In fact, not only are we growing in terms of numbers and quality of forces, our forces and our mindset are also increasing. But before I talk about the how of this rebalance, let me talk about the why. Why this area of the world is important to all of us. As each of you know, nations today are increasingly interconnected and interdependent. The oceans, which for centuries kept us apart, are now the superhighways that bring us together. Today, not only does 90% of the world's commerce travel by sea, but 95% of all international electronic communications, like the internet and telephones, travel beneath the sea. It's no exaggeration to say that the freedom of the seas is the minimum condition necessary for global prosperity and trade to flourish. This applies to the United States, a maritime nation, and a Pacific power. It applies to Canada, a maritime nation, and a Pacific power. And it applies to every one of the many nations in this room here today. We all rely on freedom of the seas so that our own economies can thrive. That's why the United States Pacific Fleet maintains a strong presence throughout the Indo-Asia Pacific. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand how crucial freedom of the seas is to this region, where we have the largest maritime flow of international trade in the world, all flowing through a handful of strategic choke points. We know that economic development in this region of the world would drive the global economy for the rest of this century, and that any disruption in the maritime domain can have lasting repercussions. Our national interests are at stake here, and so are all of yours. In his recent book, Asia's Cauldron, Robert Kaplan wrote that starting in the last phase of the Cold War, the demographic, economic, and military axis of the Earth has measurably shifted to the opposite end of Eurasia, where the spaces between the principal nodes of population are overwhelmingly maritime. And the significance of this statement isn't lost on me for a moment. Strong maritime nations need strong navies. This is not conjecture, this is not theory, this is fact. All of us here are in the same boat, so to speak. And we recognize the risks in this maritime domain, risks that we must be ready to confront, where the calamity or conflict on a regional scale can negatively impact the entire global economy. Consider the full range of natural disasters that we know all too well. Earthquakes and tsunamis and volcanoes and typhoons. If Mother Nature can dish it out, it's on the menu here in the Pacific. Back in November, we responded to the devastation left in the wake of the massive typhoon that hit the Philippines. Friends help friends, and we didn't hesitate to do so. And I'm not talking about the royal we, or we the United States. I mean we the international community, including many of the nations represented in this room tonight. We provided financial aid, manpower, and equipment to help the government of the Philippines as they recovered from their disaster, just as they would help us if we had like disasters in our countries. But we're certainly not just contending with natural disasters in this vibrant part of the world. We're also dealing with man-made issues like cybercrime, terrorism, piracy, trafficking in all its bad forms, and all types of transnational criminal activity. Then there are the more volatile threats in the region, like North Korea, with its quest for nuclear weapons and efforts to operationalize a long-range missile that can deliver them, and its attempts to sell powerful weapon systems to other rogue states and entities. As Admiral has said, and I quote, "The proliferation activities of North Korea, their desire for nuclear missiles and nuclear capabilities are highly threatening to the global security environment. And denuclearization of North Korea is an essential part of the way ahead in this part of the world," unquote. North Korea isn't just a U.S. problem, it's an us problem. In the competition for increasingly scarce resources, we see regional tensions on the rise between nations over rocks and shoals and islands that once were too small to matter. We're seeing all of this in the East and South China Seas. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm the farthest from a math major that you're ever going to see. But I remember pi r squared from my schoolboy days. And when the r in pi r squared is a 200 nautical mile circle, you could call it an EEZ if you want. Those tiny little islands that once were only an obstruction to navigation suddenly become a prime piece of real estate. Today, 40% of the world's oceans, 40% of the world's oceans are covered by somebody's EEZ. So while there has always been uncertainty in the Indo-Asia Pacific, let me be clear that there is no uncertainty about America's response to the challenges in this important region. Our continued diplomacy in Asia amid these challenges underscores the importance of the United States remaining active and strong in this region. That's why, like each of you, we are laser focused on working with our regional allies, partners, and friends to maintain stability, security, prosperity, and peace. We are, in fact, stronger together. And I applaud event organizers who had the foresight to create forums like this, the Maritime Security Challenges Conference Series, where we can discuss our common understanding, share our perspectives, and debate options for a common future. The United States has 7 collective defense arrangements in the world. 5 of them are with nations in the Indo-Asia Pacific, and we work closely with each of them. As for the other 2 treaties, one is with a collective group of nations in the Caribbean, Central and South America, and the other is NATO, perhaps the most successful alliance in modern history, where we are linked to nations throughout Europe and our close friends here in Canada. The U.S.-Canada friendship is a celebrated one, where we are each other's #1 trading partner, where we share a deep and abiding commitment to peace and prosperity, where we share the largest undefended border between nations in the world. And since 1958, Canada and the United States have also shared in the defense of North America through NORAD, a truly integrated command, a truly unique advantage of 2 sovereign countries willing to work together and willing to fight for each other. Our 2 nations have worked, fought, bled, and died together in World Wars I and II, in the Korean War and the Cold War, and our modern-day fight in Afghanistan. Now in northern Iraq, we're working together as part of a broad coalition to stamp out ISIL, an evil that threatens all law-abiding nations. We've served together on the high seas and operations and exercises around the world, and always to the same ends, stability and security for peace and prosperity. Our most recent sailing adventure occurred during the Rim of the Pacific exercise, a RIMPAC 2014, in the waters around Hawaii and California. In fact, a lot of the nations in this room were there. RIMPAC is the world's largest international maritime exercise that expands cooperation, improves safety, builds trust, and increases transparency between all participating nations. This year's was the biggest RIMPAC in the exercise's 43-year history, with 22 nations and 6 observer countries. Canada played a lead role in this exercise as Rear Admiral Courtier of the Royal Canadian Navy led as the Pacific of the Combined Force Maritime Component Commander. It's in the best interest of all of us that we manage friction and prevent misunderstanding at sea through sustained Navy-to-Navy dialogue and practical cooperation on maritime challenges faced by all Pacific nations. That's what RIMPAC is all about. Now I'm sure that you all have heard the story of the guy who went on holiday in the Himalayas. While he was there, he got the rare opportunity to visit a monastery. Now this monastery was on top of a steep mountain, and the only way you could get up there was to be pulled up the side of a 300-meter cliff in a basket. See, as he looked at the rope, he noticed it was fraying a bit, so he asked the monk sitting next to him, "How often do you guys replace the rope?" And the monk replied, "Every time it breaks." Now, that kind of logic doesn't work for most of us. There's simply too much at stake. And that's why the United States is conducting our strategic rebalance of the Pacific. We can't allow the rope to break. We've got to remain proactive in this region in order to address the challenges that we see today and tomorrow. The U.S. continues to hold government rebalance in the Indo-Asia Pacific, consisting of 4 components. There's the diplomatic, the political, the economic, and the military. The most important, I'll be honest with you, the most important component for us is the economic component. And we've got a lot of interagency civilian partners working that critical piece. But the most visible piece is the military component. All of our nation's military forces are playing an important role. As a commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, I'll talk about how our Navy is leading the rebalance in the Pacific. In fact, we're moving out on that as we develop new platforms, equipment, innovative technologies, and bringing them first to this region. The Littoral Combat Ship, the Zumwalt Destroyer, Virginia-class submarines, the Joint Strike Fighter, the MH-60 Romeo helicopter, and the P-3's replacement near and dear to my heart, the mighty P-8 Poseidon, all have had their first debut in the Pacific Fleet. And by the year 2020, 60% of the U.S. Navy will be in the Pacific. Right now, we're at about 52%. By the end of this decade, we'll be at 60%. That's what the rebalance means to the United States Navy. But our efforts are focused on more than just stuff. It's about developing gray matter as we bring our intellectual focus to bear in the region. We're experimenting and validating new tactics, techniques, and procedures and operational concepts. We're putting people with extensive knowledge or experience in key leadership positions throughout the area. And I'm an example of that. Not only was I born in Japan, but I've served 4 tours there, 8 tours in the region, and I've spent most of my academic time studying East Asia security. We're developing and educating our younger personnel to serve in the Indo-Asia Pacific, including the growth of our Foreign Area Officer Program, all in an effort to strengthen the relationships we have with our regional allies, partners, and friends. Along the same vein, I support the further integration of senior exchange officers on our major staffs. At Pacific Fleet, we've had a Canadian Naval Exchange officer in our staff since 2005, and our current one, Captain Steve Jorgensen, has been there since 2012. I don't know if you realize that, but he's been there for a while, and he wants to stay there a bit longer, and I'm all for it. Now, this isn't a one-way arrangement. I know that Admiral Trudeau's got at least 2 U.S. officers on his staff working directly for Canada for a time. This tremendous arrangement is built on decades of trust and cooperation, and is a model for the relationships that I'd like to see developed with others, who we call allies and partners and friends. And the building of that trust starts by working closely together over time, during crises and in peace, developing trust over decades. Ladies and gentlemen, now I've had my mouth open for so long, I'm worried that someone is about to cast a hook in there and pull me off the stage. So let me close with a story. Brady's about ready to do there, as a matter of fact. So let me close with a story I once heard about a man who shot and killed a long-winded speaker. He went to the sheriff's office and said, "Sheriff, I just shot and killed me a keynote speaker." The sheriff turned to the man and said, "Son, you're in the wrong place. You collect up your reward money down at the courthouse." So for those of you who are thinking about collecting some reward money, let me close with this thought. Though we all share many interests related to security and stability in the Pacific, I'm confident that we can all agree that peace and stability are the most desirable outcomes of our strategic efforts. That being said, I never lose sight of the fundamental function of the United States Navy, and that is to fight and help win our nation's wars, particularly at sea. And I can assure you that we're ready to fight tonight, if need be. But I also believe the forward presence of our U.S. Navy and Marine Corps team protects the interconnected global system of trade and underwrites the security of our entire global economy. That's why I believe that all of our national interests are intertwined, and that the only responsible way forward is to find ways to work more closely together to assure our separate and prosperous futures. As Dr. Till reminded us this morning, you can't surge understanding. You must pay attention and build relationships at each opportunity. This is juice worth the squeeze. So there are 3 great ships that sail the high seas: friendship, partnership, and leadership. And forums like these are the rudders that steer those ships toward a more prosperous future for their countries. Folks, thank you for your attention and your kindness tonight. Merci.
Well, Admiral Harris, Bruni, we all receive in our mailboxes lots of invitations to go to conferences all over the place. and we go to them once in a while, and at the end of the day, you go back to your room, you say, was it a lot of value added or not? And as I reflect over today, and the discussions we've had, thanks to our great partners at APCSS and the Navy League, I think we've had an amazing day of discussions. I think we've all been well fed and watered along the way, and I think we've just enjoyed the jewel of the crown, which was a very motivating, inspiring speech by one of the great leaders in this region, Admiral Harris. And sir, on behalf of everyone collected here this evening, let me express to you my most sincere thanks for your kind words, for your insights, and on a personal note, for your friendship and support over my tenure here in command. We do indeed enjoy a great partnership and friendship across the Pacific, and we have all gained a great deal from your remarks this evening. I hear the plane revving up in the background, and I know you got a long night ahead of you here, but thank you so very, very much for taking the time to be with us over the last 24 hours, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks very much.